Let's get started. Calling to order the meeting of the Hubbardston Agricultural Advisory Committee. Meetings that are held in this room are digitally recorded and often broadcast live. I'm not sure if we're broadcasting live, but everybody should just assume that we are. This meeting is being held exclusively in person, not online. And just as a matter of background for anybody in the public who's watching this meeting for the first time, what this committee is it is a joint committee of a bunch of boards in town that was put together by the EDC, the Planning Board, and the Select Board in order to talk about proposing a bylaw that helps our farms, helps some of our small businesses, and also helps foster ecotourism. So we have a charge from the Select Board that we've been working diligently to carry out on for the last year or so. We now have joining us some representatives from MRPC who are helping us because we've done some information discovery, we've had some internal discussions because all the folks here represent stakeholders from various groups within town, and now what we're currently doing is working with a professional in order to put pen to paper on the ideas that we've had as a group and as a community. So with that being said, turn the floor over to Tyler. And please just introduce yourself for the record and for the folks watching at home.
Okay, everyone, my name's Tyler Godin. I'm from the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. And so this is my first time meeting with you guys, so basically what I have today is just, I literally have the whole draft bylaw that I think you sent us, and I've just kind of gone crazy with notes on it, like any comments, questions, things for consideration, and I guess if you want I can just go through section by section on any comments, questions, things to consider on it.
Please, we want to get you whatever you need in order to be able to get through this.
Okay. Oh, and just with that being said, I kind of, also this is kind of just a feeling out process for me because I'm not that familiar with Hubbardston, so just trying to kind of get a feel for the current agricultural scene here, what you guys are really looking to get out of this, with existing farms and potentially new farms or agricultural projects. So yeah, with that being said, so just going through it section by section, the first part within the purpose, the only comment I really had on that was you referenced the Rural 11 prioritization project, and so just to be clear on that, that doesn't directly pertain to Hubbardston because that's a CMRPC project, Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. So that's Barre, Rutland, Princeton, Oakham. But I think it is still relevant as a reference, seeing as I think this was kind of inspired through what Rutland did.
Correct.
And that they are part of that Rural 11. So I think it is still relevant as a reference. Yeah, so I just want to make a note on that it doesn't directly pertain to Hubbardston, but still relevant.
So I guess we'll just pause to have conversations about these points when they come up, if that's fine with you.
Of course, yeah.
So that came in from a couple places. First one being exactly what you're talking about, which is what happened in Rutland was an inspiration for us for looking at this. And a lot of the information we looked at for the utility of doing this kind of thing came from some of the reports that helped Rutland move towards doing an agricultural accessory bylaw. I think where we got and where we are different from them is that they have more and I don't want to misspeak here, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this. They have more farms that are commercial enterprises and filing Schedule Fs, whereas our farms tend to be smaller. They tend to be people's second jobs. They tend to be people's retirement jobs, but they're still a tremendously important part of our landscape. And they're important to us for that. And we kind of had an evolution in the process where we started talking about ecotourism in a addition to it, and not to jump too far ahead in the review of what we're doing in the document, but one of the biggest questions that came up to us, and specifically looking at Rutland and looking at what the state's doing, is that they look at the whole idea as allowing agricultural accessory uses, and then a use is accessory if it is generating revenue of less than 50% of what the farm income is. And we all sat down, we talked about that for a while, and we're like, well, I don't think that makes sense, because somebody could have a property, and it could be a pretty substantial property, and its character and nature could be 100% farmland, but if what they're doing with it is selling hay, then their revenue at the end of the year is gonna be $12,000-$15,000, and if you're trying to set an accessory use off of half of $12,000 or $15,000, then we weren't doing anything that was meaningful. So we wanted to kind of look at and recognize the character and nature of the land, and not just make the question in terms of, well, is it half of what's going on for a farm enterprise? And that was what ultimately caused us to pull in help, but that all started off of the observations that were in those reports.
And are you talking about how we had a discussion about the percentage of the property to be, okay.
Well, that was put up as a potential alternative
Right.
to doing it by the dollar amount. And we're delighted to hear what you potentially have for recommendations in that as the process evolves, because to the best of my knowledge, we're doing something kind of new here.
Right.
Where we're trying to pull in that eco-tourism, kind of whole agro-tourism package instead of just accessory uses.
So, what I'm kind of getting from this
Yeah,
and
since I
from
don't know.
kind of what I've heard in general is Hubbardston has a lot of like pretty small operations, and kind of looking to figure out a way to go beyond these stipulations, basically, of, you know, where the state or whoever might consider it too small, or normally it might be too small, whether it's monetary or by like acreage or whatever, how to like kind of get around that.
I don't know if get around it is
Yeah, it's
necessarily the
probably
right
not the right
characterization.
word.
Well, because ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to support those people with what they're doing so they keep doing it.
Right.
Because if
How to support those smaller operations
Yeah,
rather than.
because like I mentioned, and like we talked about a bunch as a group, almost all of the folks that are running farms are either working second jobs to pay for it, or have spouses that are working second jobs, or else they're pensioners. So we want to enable those folks to do things that are related to their business without totally changing the character and nature of what's going on, that allows them to make money, be more self-sufficient, maybe not work as many hours at the second job, and overall encourage people to keep farms instead of selling them off and dividing them up into subdivisions. So
Okay.
those are the ultimate process. And anybody, feel free to add some color to that. I'm trying to
I can
summarize
think of a perfect
hours of
example.
discussion.
Davis Farmland. They have the corn maze and their little farm petting zoo area, but they are mostly hay. They actually just bought a whole nother farm and preserved it. I think it's like 50 acres, preserving it because of the fact of what they can do with their corn maze and their petting zoo. They have managed to preserve more farmland for that town. But the only way that they can do stuff like that is because they have that corn maze and the petting zoo splash pad area, which isn't really farming. I mean, it's a petting zoo and a maze made out of corn, but that brings in a bunch of money, a lot of people in the summertime, but they're primarily hay people. They hay. That hay fields are like pennies on the dollar compared to what they're bringing in that corn maze and the petting zoo. So that's the kind of,
Because farmers don't get rich in
they-
Massachusetts
No.
owning farms.
exactly.
I think a good example used to be Calico and Cream, which was an ice cream stand on a basically back road in Hubbardston. They did have some sheep and goats. Wasn't per se a pure farm, but the ice cream, you know, so if they wanted to base potential income off of the 25 cents to feed a goat, they couldn't have ice cream. And ice cream is what
Kept the
paid their
business
bills
going.
Yeah.
and allowed it to still be farmland. So that's, I think the one thing we talked about is the current use, the current farmers. But we do need to bring up, for example, what if a Davis farmland wanted to create that type of a enterprise here?
Mhm.
You know, and so that's the second aspect of it, is not only for the farms and the current people here, what's the future for that type of a situation?
And I think in bringing ecotourism and agritourism involved, wouldn't that open the field, let's say, to many more people, even outside of farmers themselves, which would be a great thing. Would that be allowable? I mean, is that part of the goal?
But potentially, that's
Yeah.
something that we've talked about trying to enable. So
Yeah.
I look at Milk Room. Well, now it's Milk Room Brewing. I can't remember the name of the farm itself underneath it. But
Case in point.
but so here you have a cattle and buffalo farm, and because of what Rutland was able to do with allowing the accessory uses, they diversified and put in a disc golf course, and that disc golf course ultimately parlayed into what's been going on with the brewery and some reasonable outdoor events. And then ultimately, now that's working its way into them working with other stakeholders to try to put in 10 miles of machine-built mountain bike trails that use the outside of the property. So by just allowing those uses in a way that makes sense, it's enabled them to go after additional money. They've actually acquired additional leases to property around them, so they've grown in size tremendously. And they've been, if it comes to the point of where they put in 10 miles of machine-built mountain bike trails, that's gonna be an economic engine for Rutland, and frankly, even for the towns surrounding Rutland,
Sure.
because that's the kind of thing that people travel and becomes a destination. So, we wanna be moving along in the curve with what's going on with that.
Right.
But also deal with the reality that if we try to just break things down by dollars for accessories, it's not gonna make sense for us.
Right. So kind of like preserving these farms, preserving like the character of Hubbardston through kind of these like accessory uses that you're referencing. I think I'll get to that some more when we get to, you know, the uses and reuse provisions. So, yeah,
You'll notice that accessory use isn't part of the title here.
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Went beyond that.
So yeah, moving along, so this overlay district, is it gonna be the entire residential agricultural zone?
So that's something that I think is up for debate, and
Okay.
something we're gonna have to work out through public feedback, because my recollection of our intent to do that is to use the overlay in a way that keeps this passable for the town. So like if going out and talking to the community, there are folks that are like, well, I think this makes sense for this area, but maybe it doesn't make sense for this subdevelopment over
Right.
here. But I think it's a more nuanced issue than that, because like when we were talking about it, Kathy brought up an example of a garlic farmer, where you could have somebody who could have a half-acre plot and actually be running a fairly lucrative business off of that small plot. And, well, to the extent that they're doing that, they probably should just be able to have a small stand as long as it's not causing traffic problems and like those kinds of things. So I think there's discussion to have about that, and that's something that we're gonna have to flesh out in the process.
My understanding through a commercial overlay that we were working on, doesn't it entitle you to jump over as well? Be here, skip this, and bring it back over here?
Well, it potentially allows you to bring in uses that aren't ordinarily allowed in the underlying zoning.
Okay.
So
Well, I think
it-
like the
You can
garlic-
define the geography
Yeah.
however you
Yeah.
want.
But like
Yeah.
that, like what you were talking about, having a stand, isn't that that's under right to farm? So it would have to be above that. You know what I mean? Like having a stand at the end of your driveway, that's part of right to farm. That we
Yeah.
can't tell them where they are that they can't do that. Anyone in town could do that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's like certain things that regardless of, even if they have like one of those little plots in Pinecrest, they can still do it.
Yeah.
Like be a garlic farmer and manage to pull that off. It's when it turns into something that a half an acre wouldn't be suitable for, you know? And that gets to be kind of a slippery slope, what people can and can't tell people what to do with a farm, you know, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it'd be something like on the larger scale.
Hmm.
So it's where that line gets drawn is the question.
I guess to take the example to the extreme, that like that half acre of garlic in what is a more residential in character area probably shouldn't automatically enable you to have special events and weddings.
Right.
So there's some level of thought and some level of exchange that needs to go on there and needs to get kind of fleshed out in the process. And that was one of the spots where we just kind of got hung up on, because we were like, how do you parse this out? Other than just going out and talking to the community, and maybe we do a Survey Monkey and just kind of feel the public for where pressure might be on it.
Right.
But yeah, it's totally a discussion point.
Okay. And then just the next section's definitions. So basically, I just went through like whatever other town or county agritourism bylaws I could find, and I just kind of like compared them to see what could be relevant for this. And you guys mentioned farmers markets in here, and I know like you kind of think of a farmer's market and you have a certain idea of what it is in your mind, but I think that might be something to consider, like actually putting a definition behind. I saw a few bylaws actually give a definition of it, just like one mentioned how many basically different farms I think were involved, or farmers. So yeah, that's just something to consider. And then also you mentioned rural character, and I know that that can sometimes be a little bit of point of contention, like it's not really like a matter of fact type thing, like someone might argue that this does fit in a rural setting, but you know, the town might not see it that way, so that might be something to consider, kind of putting some kind of definition behind. And I did see.
I think I would be more inclined to delete those words rather than trying to define them.
Right, that's another thing to consider.
I think there's also kind of a potential landmine there, and I can't remember which session at the Citizen Planner Training Conference from a few months ago, but that rural character itself can almost become a discriminatory phrase. and
Right,
that
yeah.
sometimes it's just worth avoiding for that purpose.
Right, yeah, I think, but I went to that as well, and I think someone mentioned that that's just kind of like, you know, almost like a trigger word, or trigger phrase, cause
Yeah.
it creates, you know.
It gets you the good evaluation from the Attorney General.
Exactly, yeah. So then, the next part, permit procedure authority, there's nothing really there, cause that's just saying the planning board, is the administering authority. And then we get into use provisions. So the first thing that I'm just gonna comment on this, and my initial thought was that you probably don't wanna include this, but I did see some other ones where they actually mentioned, along with use provisions, what, like, prohibited uses. But I know, obviously, you're trying to be more inclusive and stuff. I don't know if you really wanna include prohibited uses, but I
We
just.
should hear 'em.
Yeah, I think it's worth having a discussion about it. I think our ultimate purpose is to try to be as enabling as possible.
Right.
I don't know if anyone feels any differently on that.
No.
I'm sure there probably are some things that if you pushed on hard, it was like, well, if somehow non-motorized is already in there. The example I was gonna go with, it was like if somebody was to put in like a racetrack or
Right.
something along those lines, but I think that's already taken care of because.
Yeah, I think there are other ways to kind of without putting in like a prohibited use table to say like, you can't do this basically. So, I just thought that was something to consider, cause I saw that come out in other, bylaws.
Is it worth to hear what some of them are?
Well, we would have to think of them.
Oh.
Yeah, it would be
Oh,
more
I thought-
directly,
I'm
like-
sorry, I thought you'd seen them in other,
Well,
with other.
there, like, that was an example, like the motorized vehicles, like junkyards, transfer stations, things
Yeah.
like that.
Is there a way to classify them instead of listing them? In other words, say anything that, you know, is a public nuisance or dangerous
Mhm.
to the community or produces excess noise or
Right.
or pollution or something like that?
Yeah, there is other ways, just like,
Somebody could say that about a rooster though, too,
Yeah,
so
that,
just.
Yeah.
that gets potentially challenging.
well, you
there-
could say like
yeah.
amplification of sound rather than like, you know,
Count.
noise level.
There is the example from Northborough, that kind of farm, kind of composting facility that's running on the border between Berlin and Northborough and Marlborough, that's creating huge amounts of controversy. It's probably worth maybe thinking a little bit about prohibited uses from that perspective, because essentially what they did is like, oh yeah, no, we're a pig farm. But what they're actually running is allegedly what they're actually running is a very large commercial composting and disposal facility, and not so much a pig farm. There's like 3 or 4 pigs that escape sometimes and make the news, but and that is an example where somebody is really putting in a hard effort to kind of take advantage of the system that's in place for it. But it probably is worth thinking about that maybe there is some kind of backstop, or I think that's already a prohibited use in the underlying zoning, so maybe we
That's
just
where I was
wanna-
going.
We'll wanna
Uh,
reiterate that prohibited use.
Some area, I mean, an overlay is gonna be additive on top
Right,
of
right.
existing zoning, right? So there are gonna be some areas of town, for instance, the aquifer favorability bylaw, which is gonna have a bunch of prohibited uses for some areas. I don't know if we have any other prohibited uses in any of our other bylaws.
Yeah, I don't believe there is. I think there just is in our
Yeah, so
underlying
then
uses.
you probably should list as a prohibited thing in the underlying laws of, in regards to aquifers,
Mm.
that those will still prevail.
Yeah.
They would, yeah, without jumping through any hoops here.
And then probably continue forward the other prohibited uses like airport, which is listed specifically, and apparently there's a lot of history around, and then large scale disposal facilities.
Mm.
Or large scale, and maybe that gets into an issue with definitions where you start having to define large scale, because
Right.
running creating compost is a viable thing that should be
Yeah.
allowed for most farms.
Yeah.
But
I was just gonna ask
Regenerative
about that. Yeah, I
farming.
was surprised to learn that's a prohibited use at all,
That's really-
but
yeah.
I guess in a large enough scale it could be, but.
Well, if you're having it trucked in from other farms,
Yeah.
because
There's
3
a
pigs are
state
not.
standard on commercial composting facilities and a whole set of rules. So it's maybe something everybody should just look at before we actually take time to worry about it.
Well, if there's a state definition, it also might just be a way to reference it and not have to
Correct.
deal with having to set up any kind of definition on our own.
Correct.
Hmm.
Because
Does
there's a
any
whole
fa-
licensing process and everything for those places.
Yeah, 'cause like most farms
Oh, yeah.
that have animals, like he's gonna be composting, but
course, yeah.
he's not gonna truck it in from all the alpaca farms in the state, you know, so. He's thinking about it now though, he's like, hey.
I mean, that's an
I have
option.
thought about it. I have not done it, but I have thought about it.
Oh, let's not, how about that? Let's not cause problems.
Well, and even that, like trucking it in from all the alpaca farms, that isn't what was going on in Northborough.
Right.
Like, they were getting tractor trailer truckloads of stuff from like
Boston.
food distribution centers in Boston
Like,
and.
all kinds of-
Yeah.
Construction debris.
Yeah, it was something very different.
I'm from Northborough originally, and one of our chickens even came from that farm in a roundabout way. It got loose and got into the next neighborhood. But
It's like, I'm
yeah,
free.
an interesting situation that's been going on for about 20 years now, I think.
Oh, wow.
And in fairness, didn't the composting facility in Westminster, was it, have to close recently, I think because of forever chemicals?
PFAS, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're probably gonna wanna think about that
Yeah,
then.
definitely something to consider. And then just within the allowable uses, just in general, it's like obviously heavy on food related farm products, but I think there should be some mention of just like other agriculturally produced products like wool, things that are made out of wool, or even hay was mentioned, and just like the sale of it on the premises, and just like in general, like a farm store, or you could even say like an agricultural store. And then also greenhouses or nurseries, I don't know if that's something you've considered, and then you could get specific if you wanted like exactly what's grown in the greenhouses.
So that's something that's come up for discussion at the planning board level, mostly because when we look at the Davis amendments, it seems to suggest that you can't require a special permit for a greenhouse, but our bylaws do, which is something that I believe we're actually changing the next town meeting. We're trying to make our allowable uses compliant with the Davis amendments.
Anything about
So-
nurseries in it?
No, I believe it just said, it's what, 48(3) or something
Yeah,
like
section
that.
3, yeah.
Yeah, and it just says you can't require a special permit. I think it was just for a commercial greenhouse. I don't know if anybody knows any better if it included nurseries, but yeah, I don't know how we work along with that. We want to allow greenhouses.
Yeah.
Where it gets a little dicey is when you're talking about cannabis, but ultimately
Right,
with
yeah.
cannabis, that's covered by a different bylaw in the state saying that for that particular purpose,
Yeah.
it's commercial use and not agricultural.
Okay.
Greenhouse, so.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I guess, yeah, to the extent we wanna make all that allowable, but not accidentally put in a loophole that makes it so somebody can have a cannabis grow by right.
Right. And I think usually when the greenhouse was written, it said, for the most part, it was greenhouse or nurseries, and then it said something about like for the raising of flowers or something along those lines, like they specified
Yeah.
what was
Well,
grown within
I
them.
mean, for that specific example, I think that's totally adequately protected by state statute in Massachusetts. I don't
Mhm.
think we need to jump through hoops to say, yeah, you can have a greenhouse.
Right.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
We don't need to say so.
So yeah, I think that's
I like
all
it. I like it.
I had for like things to add under allowable uses. You had a pretty good list to begin with. And then, then you have the next allowable uses based on, larger lots, like things that require 5 acres or more. And I didn't really have anything to add there. Again, you had a pretty good list to begin with.
I guess pause for a quick question there, and I think it likely does not apply here because it's a different context, but we got our hands slapped by the AG's office because we were trying to set a minimum size on marijuana grows. And I think ultimately it's a different situation because I think we made some draftsmanship mistakes proposing that amendment to our bylaws, and we accidentally included in marijuana manufacturing and sales locations, and I think that triggered them to reject it based upon the area limitation, but they did send us back about a 1.5-page letter on how they believe that area limitations on uses discriminate against historically underserved populations that may not have the access to capital. So I don't think they're gonna hit it on an agriculture enabling overlay.
Right.
But I just wanted to bring that up as an issue of something that we bumped into.
I'm just looking at like what you have in the list, it seems pretty reasonable that you'd want minimum of 5 acres for like a corn maze or, you know, even like a petting zoo type thing. Well, maybe not like a minimum, but at least like a setback from other, like abutting, like if you abutted another residential parcel or something. Like I could see where you would definitely not want, like, a goat like right on the edge of your property, like if you're the abutting owner.
Or a wedding being held.
It's not necessarily the goat, it's the traffic
Right.
and number of visitors to that neighborhood and or street.
Hmm.
That is more of the concern, I think.
Right.
It's, versus an actual animal.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to generate parking.
Yeah, and I have a lot of notes on like traffic management and parking, that come out a little later. And then just like allowable uses by special permit. I'm kind of all over the place with my notes here, so I'll try and keep it structured. So the first two, just like something I noticed, the first two are kind of like short term, with the weddings and concerts, and then the last three, CDE, campgrounds, lodging, and then the other uses related to like disc golf and mini golf. Those are more of like long-term seasonal, so I wasn't sure, that's just like something I noticed, I wasn't sure if that's something you wanted to, like the standards of what would go into that, I wasn't sure if if that's something you wanted to consider.
So there's some history behind that
Mhm.
and why those specific uses came up. The first one being is there was a large 200-acre property that got sold recently that was a farm with significant deferred maintenance, where some folks were looking to come in and buy it, and as part of it, they were going to renovate the barns and turn one of them into a wedding venue, in addition to growing cereal crops and some other stuff on the property. And when that came in front of the planning board, we were in a place where like, we kind of would like to have the ability to grant this, but we can't. So I don't even know that you should submit your application on this. And ultimately, the property ended up being sold to somebody who just has it in private use now. But that was one of the genesis events for that, and also there are a couple folks that have what I would describe as farm-like land that are currently holding weddings on it on a regular basis. And the thought behind that is that is not something we want to prohibit, but it's something that we want to make it possible for people to bring into the fold.
Mhm.
Because there's things that we as a town should know about, like particularly if somebody's pouring alcohol or something like that. We don't want this to be an underground wedding venue.
Right.
And there's issues that certainly the Board of Health would be interested in, like, do you have toilets? Like, is all of this being done on a septic system that's designed for a 2-bedroom house? So we figure that at the least, there's stuff there that should be subject to a site review or something along the lines of that. Maybe it isn't a full special permit process, but that it's definitely some form of elevated type of review. I know Mark had some thoughts on this too.
Well, let's go back to your original point.
The short term
The
versus.
distinction between
Right.
short-term versus a
Ongoing.
Right.
long-term use. Where are you going with that?
Well, just
Why
like
do
in
you-
your, like if you wanted to develop like a standard, like within your special permit, like I think the considerations would be different for something that happens over one day as compared to something that happens, seasonally or throughout the entire year.
Well, weddings, if it's weddings or concerts or festivals, they're not gonna have one.
So this is considering it as like a type of like special event facility kind of thing?
It would be like a venue.
Right, okay.
Cause at a wedding venue, you could do all of those. You could have a concert, even if it's an outdoor wedding.
And by,
It could-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It would be you could have a concert or, special events or all kinds of stuff outdoors and
Mhm.
reuse it every weekend. And I think there needs to be, like you said, some kind of oversight, but I wanna make sure we're not going to do the full extent that some of the special permits go into, because these are farms and they can't afford it, like to the
Right,
get-go,
right, right.
that's what my major concern is, but I can't see a wedding venue, a farmer doing it once and being like, oh, no, that's enough money, thanks, I'm good, no more. They're gonna do it over and over again.
Right,
Or an Airbnb where, you know, from the perspective of the renter,
Yeah.
it's a short-term thing, cause they're only staying there for
Exactly.
3 days, except that the owner is
Doing it
at least
repeatedly.
doing it repeatedly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there are some perhaps one-off events that should be subject to a higher level of review, like Tough Mudder or like Warrior Dash or some of those. Some of those are enormous events
Mhm.
where 10,000 people show up. I know there was something in Hudson not that long ago, where it was actually a Brazilian rodeo, and they had like 12,000 people show up to it. And just like these absolutely insane numbers that happen at some of these, and I know that it is something that has come up specifically in Barry with Stone Cow having some of those events, and with I can't remember if it was Kylon Farm or Bull Spit Brewing. They were also having some of those issues in, that's Lancaster there, right? Where it was creating problems because, and this is contentious, and I'm not expressing an opinion on either side of it, I just think we should have clarity for it. Because they were saying, well, you guys have the Bolton Fair across the street, and that has thousands of people at it. So if we have 4,000 people out to an event, why do we have to get a special permit? I was like, well, from my perspective and from a Hubbardston perspective, well, maybe you don't need a special permit, but you probably do need some kind of review for that.
Mhm. And just what I was seeing in some of the other bylaws was the temporary sanitation facility came up in like every one, and for like short term, it was the standards for that were different than if it's long term. Like some of the short terms had like must remove like porta potties or whatever, within like a week period, rather than like long term. It was just, you know, whatever.
Can I mention something? One thing that I don't see up there, it might be under festivals, but what about vendor events? We have farms that do vendor events.
That would be, festivals.
Be under festivals,
Yeah.
okay. You
Um,
might wanna distinguish that.
Well,
Yeah.
okay,
Concerts, festivals, fairs.
yeah.
Yeah, festivals, fairs, that, I could see
The-
it falling into that.
The other thing that I think is worth noting here is that we don't really have a site plan review process baked into our zoning as it is.
okay.
And that's something that
Oh,
we would.
that's not a good look.
That is something that is
Uh-oh.
on our to-do list
Oh.
during the rest of my term on the planning board, but we have quite a few things on our to-do list, but we do not really have an established site plan, a modern site plan review process built into our bylaws.
Okay.
Just to clarify that, the site plan review is there.
Is there,
It's
but you
just
don't
that
have a procedure.
it's tied strictly to a special permit.
Okay,
If it doesn't require a special permit, it doesn't require a site plan review.
okay. We
So-
have that problem in Townsend, they're linked together, and it's annoying.
Yeah.
It's quite annoying for us and the applicant, cause they're like, I just wanna do a site plan review.
And then, so kind of getting at that for the next part, you mentioned, what kind of criteria would be eligible for an expedited site plan review. So, some of like what I saw for other bylaws, they kind of had,
Down,
Too far.
had the applicant.
Stop.
Two.
No,
Number
no,
two.
go.
Number two.
Stop.
There you go.
So they kind of had like the applicant write up, or just answer like a couple basic questions and write like a brief narrative, like, what's the size of the farm, like is there any history, what's the use gonna be, how many people are you expecting, how is this gonna impact traffic, what's the parking situation look like, and then that could possibly be used to determine if it's an expedited site plan review or if it requires further evaluation. And
I have to say though, that I had talked to Mallory last year about my property, and she said if I did something agricultural with it, I didn't have to deal with any parking at all. That's what she told me. She said parking would not be in it, you know, I said, would I have to do, you know, get a plan for parking? She said, not if it's agricultural. So that's what she told me.
I don't know the specific facts that she evaluated and the specific things that she was citing to.
It might be
but-
because I happen to be commercial. My home is a commercial and residential, but I'm zoned commercial. Maybe that made,
Yeah, we have some challenging parking standards
Yes, we
in our
do.
bylaws.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I don't know what specifically she was looking at, I'm just gonna leave it with, we have some challenging parking standards in our bylaws.
okay.
Yeah, and I definitely do not wanna see a farm have to pave anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a definite
I don't wanna see them have to
Yeah.
pay for anything like that,
Yeah.
even for the, you know, architectural.
Cause that kind, well, it
no.
just defeats the purpose of trying
Well, sure.
to save the land. Oh, no, wait, you
Absolutely.
need a whole parking lot, we need you to tar it,
Fill
we
it
need
with
the
concrete and
spaces,
tar,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
no, that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's just like one note that I had.
So the one approach that you saw, that you've talked about so far, is basically just a short narrative description to
Right.
describe the scale of what it is they're
And-
proposing.
Yeah, and I think that's important just to kind of understand like what their intentions are and what like on your end what you need to consider, and maybe it's just like right away like okay, this is fine, or you know, requires further evaluation. And that, yeah, also just like what you guys are getting at, like you have to consider like the ease of doing this basically while also making like, you know, a reasonable bylaw. So like you don't wanna exclude anybody, like you don't want somebody trying to get into this business and like look at all these requirements and then,
Exactly.
so it's tough to find kind of what you wanna exclude, what you wanna include while being, you know, inclusive.
At the same time, trying to think ahead of what might come. you know,
Right.
Somebody might come with a different idea, and oh, we didn't put that in, and, you know, yeah.
And then just like some general notes that I saw that other ones included was just like things about sound level, and I think, you know, the rooster thing to get around that is you say like no amplification of sound, and from what I saw it said like no amplification of sound like between these hours, like past 10 p.m.
Mhm.
or something like that.
So no control.
Like that loud,
Yeah.
not allowed.
That's the, hey, you guys have a weed meeting in 40 minutes.
Yes.
Sound.
Yes, we do.
And then site plan submissions for an expedited review shall include, oh yeah, this, I've kind of already got at this, and then just going back to, some of them required like a traffic management plan and parking plan depending on the size of the operation.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to, I mean, are we looking to tell people if you have this much property, you can only have this many guests? If they're, let's say they're doing weddings, well, you have this much property, this much parking, now you can't have more than 50 guests or 100 guests. We don't wanna do that.
Not in the bylaw.
think so.
No,
Yeah.
but we definitely
Need-
should consider appropriate measures for traffic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because that's what neighbors complain about.
More than
when-
anything.
When
Yeah.
people do stuff.
Sure.
So to the extent that.
Katie's wedding.
Yeah, I
So-
actually had to pay for a cop.
So
My
to
wedding.
the extent that we can keep the neighboring roads from getting clogged up without putting
Exactly.
an unreasonable burden on folks trying to do stuff, we
Mhm.
should, because it will keep this being better received by the public.
Yes, yeah. Have all those
A lot of
questions
this,
answered.
a lot of this stuff that we've been touching on is, we have to think about whether it's better addressed specifically in a bylaw or just left to the special permit review process.
Mhm.
Yeah, some of it, I think there will be a challenge though, because of what our parking standards and such are. I can't pull them off the top of my head right now, but it is a relatively small number of spaces before our bylaws like, yep, gotta pave it. It's only like 4 spaces or something like that. It's some ridiculously small number.
Or you could say the overlay district is exempt from whatever section of parking is.
Yeah.
And instead, you have to call the police and, work out a plan.
Yeah, I think that's.
Good point.
That's pragmatically what we'll need to do, because it became contentious points of discussion on special permits we've done over the last few years, where it's really been an impediment to somebody trying to run a business.
Right.
Well, some of it too might not necessarily require police either, like if it's on 68, when he does his, not to throw you under the bus. Sorry, when there's, happens to be a fair on 68, at a farm, there's,
Twice a year.
yeah,
I mean, a
there's
small
a
gathering of colleagues.
yes, and there's a field, and there's not really a need for a cop, even though there's people going in and out all day. But if that same thing, and this is where that catch-22 comes in, if it's on a back road and there's not enough like people start parking on the street, then that might definitely be a problem with the
But
neighbors.
I have heard concerns when they've had their events. I've heard concerns.
Yeah, but
from
you hear
people.
that about Rieta too, so it's like
Sure,
you
but
can
they're not, you know,
only do so much.
They're not our
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, but I mean, there's people that go in and out on 68 regardless, that just
And the only
cause problems.
concerns that I've heard is for the safety of people trying to cross.
Yeah.
Not that there was traffic, not that I got stuck behind anything, I couldn't get to work on it, it was simply,
But if
ooh,
they
I saw
are,
someone, you know.
yeah, I know, but technically they're not supposed to park there, they're supposed to park in the parking lot, which is right there. And there's even signs, not that I've ever seen it,
No.
or been there.
No.
I guess to just keep us moving, it's
Yeah,
certainly a
sorry.
thing that people care about, and I think we just need to put a little bit of thought.
Yes,
Mm.
I agree, it's gonna be like, depending on what it is, how big and where it's located, and
Well,
is it repetitive?
I'm gonna ask you something it's not related to AAC, but, you know,
Okay, but
the
we only have 7
businesses.
more minutes
Yeah,
scheduled for this.
But just, is that 4 parking space, like across the board?
Don't quote me to it, it's in our design standards, but
Okay.
yeah, I can send you a link to where that is.
Okay. Cause that could make it difficult for any of our businesses that wanna maybe
Yeah.
Maybe it
start
does.
having retail out of their homes, I mean, gosh. Okay.
So, yeah, I just have a few more notes left, and I think we've touched on most of them already anyways. A lot of them talked about lighting, like outdoor lighting shall be directed away from roads and things like that. And then even some gave like hours that they can be on, so that might be something you wanna consider.
We're generally supportive of dark sky compliant,
Okay.
Mhm.
but I don't know if that creates an unreasonable burden for someone who's doing a short-term event as opposed to somebody who's putting up something long-lasting with fixtures. To the
Mhm.
extent that somebody was installing fixtures, those should be dark sky compliant. To the extent that somebody's just trying to provide emergency lighting in the parking lot while they're having a quilt swap or something like that. It's tough to come up with different.
I know.
But, in that kind of situation, it would obviously be unreasonable, so.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think we kinda need to walk that line, and it's something, there was a advisory committee for the open space, plan, and dark sky compliance was actually a pretty contentious thing that came up at that, so, there is definitely a contingent in the town that is pretty passionate about, dark sky
Indeed.
compliance.
Okay. And then just like the last thing I have was just discussing with Karen today about this, you could throw something in there that says unless it is strictly allowed under this bylaw, then it's prohibited. But again, like anything, that could become problematic.
Yeah, I kinda hesitate at that,
Don't
just
we already
because-
have that? We already have that, don't we?
Well, we do in our standard uses.
Yeah.
We don't for this this. So if something under this was in the spirit of it, like say if there are, I don't know, all these hypotheticals are difficult. Say all of a sudden like one-wheel riding becomes like the biggest thing in the world, and everybody just wants to go to farms to ride one-wheels, but we're like, you know, non-powered bicycles or pedal assist, like, okay, but it's a one-wheel. If that's something that's reasonable in that situation,
Mhm.
it's within the spirit of what we're proposing here, so I don't think we should have a blanket prohibition for that, but,
So probably best to leave it outright.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you wanna say who gets to make that determination though? Does it
Well,
have
yeah,
to
you
come
could
before
do
the?
it on a case-by-case basis,
Yeah,
decided by the planning
by the
board.
planning board, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
More work.
You know, prohibited it unless it's,
Unless it's
I definitely,
approved
I
on a
definitely
case by
thought
case
about
basis
that
by
at the
planning
time. I
board,
don't
yeah.
remember if there's any language further up in this. What's the language at the beginning of the uses section?
Allowable uses.
Keep going.
That's the last one before we get into, that's over the sufficient.
Keep going.
Yeah, examples of allowable uses
Oh,
include but are not limited to.
Yeah, I guess that's where I settled on it.
Yeah.
But are not.
But yeah, if it's not in here now, it's gotta be in there somewhere as to who makes that judgment.
or like I said, just put the, will be on a case-by-case basis review.
Yeah,
Cause
yeah, clearly.
we could sit here all day trying to think of a list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's things we haven't thought of, hoverboards.
Yeah, I mean, hoverboards could be a thing, but like real hoverboards, not like the
Right.
tilty ones.
So that's all I have. If there's anything you guys want me to research or give more consideration to, or any comments, questions.
So just give everybody a moment to think about it, because it's a lot.
So, can somebody summarize what the scope of work is for MRPC from this point forward?
So I think, you know, Tyler will take back what you've all talked about and revise that bylaw and, you know, we'll just go back and forth. I mean, there's really no other way to get it done. Do you have ideas?
Not really, I just wasn't clear on, I haven't seen the DLTA agreement is what it comes down to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I forgot to send that over to you before this, sorry.
Can open it.
Let me just, on this use provisions, is this for properties that are 5 acres or more?
That one's not.
No,
That
that's
one's
just.
not.
No,
Yeah.
further down.
This one is with sufficient
Yes,
acreage.
with sufficient acreage, okay. Okay, terrific.
Yeah, and remember that ultimately we're making a recommendation that's gonna end up having to be held for public hearing and
Yeah.
then subject to debate by the planning board and the
course.
select board.
Yeah.
So the best we can do is put the best foot forward and hope that the team carries the day on the rest of it.
Yeah. We'll help you with that.
So do we wanna set another powwow and see what you have in a, last time I
This is
said 2
great.
weeks' time, Karen went, eh.
That would be a little
You're
bit-
not the only project in town.
We're special, come on.
Everybody thinks they're special.
But we're right.
Wow, he's really come into the fold, huh?
Getting there.
I guess it depends upon how much of a presentation and how much time you think you need, because from a scheduling,
Pardon
the
me.
space standpoint and scheduling a chunk of the people here, kind of working before, in this time slot where we're in, or maybe even a little bit later, before the meetings that happen, maybe a month from now, makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense to me.
Yeah, I would say, I was thinking I definitely need a month, I would think, yeah, so that would be good.
Yeah, and that keeps us within the timeline that's proposed on the scope too, so.
Okay.
Technically, we have till December 31st, but, oh, I thought you did.
I thought you
You
did
have
too.
6 hours and
But
31 minutes.
You guys,
I'm really busy 1 month from now.
I thought you were about to put up the schedule. Nick, can you put the schedule up?
Yep.
I think you actually wrote it way more
Task,
aggressive than
the
that.
task schedule?
I
I think you
know, I
wrote it to
did,
like
because
a
I was
deliverable for
mad.
June. Well, in my mind, if we're on track to get to a special town meeting in the fall, then we've won. But
There we go.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we're on track. So we'd be talking. Well, I guess we'd be one meeting behind, but yeah, we would be stepping through what the formal draft was
Mhm.
at the next meeting, and then we'd probably have one meeting after that, and we would look at what would be a final copy, and then probably vote it forward as a recommendation to the other boards.
Yeah, task
So-
3 says April to June. We're not even in June yet, so we're good.
When's did you have town meeting yet?
No,
Nuh-uh.
June
That's
6th.
Okay,
So it's not
So
gonna
you-
hit that.
yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it'll be a
there-
special town meeting.
No, I don't
Yeah.
mean for it to be on this town meeting, I
Yes,
just
no.
mean everybody's like nuts for town meeting time.
To an extent.
We don't get worried about it
We
at
just-
all.
No,
Well,
nothing
no.
bad ever happens at this time of the year.
Yeah, but because of the school budget, there'll most certainly be a special town meeting in the fall, so.
Yeah.
Unless they just cave.
Yeah, right.
Stuff that
Yeah.
they're doing.
So for the next meeting, do you want me to just send you like the edits that I've made to the bylaw, and then we can review it like on the screen together, sort of like how we did today?
Yeah, I think that would make sense, and we could also make an effort to promote it a little bit more to the public to see if we can get anybody who wants to come in and comment on it.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, well, with the edits that we talked about included, essentially step through it. Better promote the meeting with the public a little more instead of just posting it, like we'll actually put on like the Facebook page and stuff and see if there's anybody who.
And plus, we have a
wants to come
couple
and be
events
really
coming up
passionate.
in town also where
Yeah.
we can talk about this and share this information and just get some feedback.
Okay.
So I'd like to be able to include them in those events, include this info.
Well, that and that fire, agricultural, commission person over here could relay this to the rest of the farmers to make sure, cause if there's a problem on that side, we
Yeah.
wanna know about it now.
And what, are you doing a farm special, a farm social this year?
It's in the planning stages, so I'm hoping to do something later this summer, yes.
Later in the summer, okay.
What if you had a
All
draft
good times.
copy to hand out at town meeting, just as information, cause it's
Yeah.
a captive, you know, there's a lot of people there, they can take it home and read it or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Like
only
a
two
special
pages
sneak
per
preview in a
file.
movie.
Yeah.
Like coming soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
A nice
You're not
trailer.
voting on this today, but next
One
time.
year, next time, at town meeting.
Yeah, I don't know that would be helpful. Maybe
Oh,
having a
you have
QR.
other amendments on the.
We do.
warrant.
Well, perhaps having,
Oh,
I
yes,
think
we
what would
do.
make sense, maybe we put up a QR code for people to find it, but I think if
Mm.
we give the handout to
Okay.
people at town meeting,
Alright.
it's gonna generate a lot of confusion.
Okay.
Cause we're,
Overwhelm them. We don't wanna overwhelm anybody.
yeah, we're fixing a bunch of that formatting and such that is kinda hung over in our zoning at this meeting, so. Alright,
You
so.
make pages and pages
So you
out
don't
of
wanna meet
just
the first
that?
week of June, cause that's.
Well, minutes are great.
It's either the week of the 12th or the 19th.
How do you do that?
So, the
June 19th is a holiday.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
But she's talking about the week of.
what about the Thursday of that week?
22nd?
That's the third Thursday, is it, or, I guess it's the fourth Thursday. Could we do the 15th? Would that be enough time?
Well, what is the 15th? I'm
It's a
going away that
Thursday.
week. I'm away.
Yeah,
Oh.
we could do the 22nd.
Oh, yeah, TG vacation.
I'm not around that week.
22nd.
It's also the summer solstice. Can't just, you know.
Well, I don't know, we're getting into summertime, so I don't think we're gonna have a date that's gonna be perfect for everybody.
Don't just wanna look at the dates, cause you were the third Wednesday.
You
One, two,
can,
so 21.
if it ends up on a time where somebody can't make it, they can certainly send their comments into me to present at the meeting without violating the open meeting laws, so.
Especially anything you've heard from other farmers and have them pipe up.
Yes, 'cause, yep, Debbie
Wow.
had never called me back. I had called a couple of weeks ago to
Yeah.
meet, remember, we were gonna talk with Debbie and Keith about what they're hearing, what to get a list and be able to talk with them. I didn't hear anything back.
So does
So maybe
the,
we could put that together in the next bit of time.
does the 22nd work for everybody else?
Wasn't around.
I think so.
It happens.
If it works for everybody else, I think that's what we're gonna shoot for, and we'll just have
What
you sit
day?
in here.
22nd? Okay.
So 22nd at 5:30?
Tyler, do you think you can get that to them by the 9th? That gives them like a week and a half to read it and mull it.
Yes.
And get it out on our social media and stuff.
Wait, what's
so-
today?
Today's the
Yeah,
third.
yeah, 1 week should be fine.
1, 2, 3, 4,
It's.
5, that's 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, June 9th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
I
yeah.
mean, wait, let's go back though. If you can do next week, like, that's
And you mentioned that just now.
You said the 9th, and I'm like, it's the
Sorry.
3rd, like.
You're not
a little
supposed to give
close.
away the secret. I mean, we can certainly do it sooner. But we were thinking to give you a little more time and then have time for us to send it around and then publish it on our Facebook.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
if you can get it to us before June, that would be ideal, because then we can have it sit on the website, on the Facebook page, and go out and promote it to all of these other boards and committees to find out if anyone is gonna mount an objection to this ahead of time, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the 9th of this month, but
Yeah.
if it could be before the end of this month, that would certainly help us out. But do the 9th if that works for you.
Yeah, I'll try, I'll put it fairly high on my priority
Okay.
list.
Yeah, cause it's like I said, it definitely makes it easier for us to shop and sell it to the public, so.
Right, yeah.
That would be huge.
Alright, cool.
What,
Awesome.
I have it the next meeting, okay.
Any,
The next meeting is what date again?
22nd,
Actually,
June.
yeah.
Make sure that's out in front of it.
16 days? What?
alright, does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, how about a motion?
I'd like to make a motion
Motion.
to end this meeting.
Here in a first and a
Second.
second, on the table. All in favor?
Aye.